important fast forward was actually several years later, and this is where we start with the care method, is like what I was still not doing after all this time was slowing down. I could not slow down.
Hey everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Entering Motherhood, a podcast dedicated specifically to new moms going through this amazing journey in life. I'm your host, Sarah Bilger, a postpartum nutritional coach / mechanical engineer. And as always, I'm so excited to be here with you and share all of the information I've been lucky enough to obtain since becoming a mom.
In this episode, we talk with Melissa Salmeron about her journey into motherhood and how she now helps moms work through issues that took her years to achieve in a short amount of time using what she likes to refer to as the care method.
Before this episode begins, I just want to say thank you so much for listening.
And I also want to talk about a couple of events we have coming up, one starting April 1st.
This event is for mamas who are either currently trying to conceive, are pregnant, or are in the early postpartum stage and may have some trauma in their life that they're looking to release. We go through 30 ways in 30 days of how to heal your trauma. You'll get a workbook and you'll listen to the daily mini episodes of the podcast that correspond to this a unique experience. I hope that you know that you are not alone in this and that you deserve this time to heal.
The other event we have coming up is the first ever Entering Motherhood Festival, and it is happening on May 15th, 2022, right here in the Greenville area.
If you want more information on this, please go to the Entering Motherhood website or feel free to reach out to me with any questions. And with that, let's get this episode started. Hello and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I am super excited to finally get to talk to you and have this conversation today. So how about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation today and share some valuable tips just for moms and new moms as well. And a little bit about me. My name is Melissa Salmeron, and I am a mom of three. I have a boy who is 11, a 7, almost 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So life is very interesting in my house, navigating the preteen years all the way to just the starting out years. And I would say I got into this line of work, this coaching of moms, because I went on this very how to put it, I just went on this very long journey, I guess, of really rediscovering and in some cases just discovering who I was after I became a mother. And I know we're going to talk more about this, and I'll share more about what that journey was and what it led me to create, and then of course how I help moms today. But that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. So, you have a range of ages with your kids. How has it been, between initially postpartum with your 11-year-old and now, like your 2-year-old, like just in those few years of a difference, what has really shifted and changed from those, even all three experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I am just a completely different person than I was when I had my 11-year-old. And, you know, poor guy. No, I mean, I'm joking. But when I had my oldest, I was really just a ball of anxiety. I had no idea that I was anxious. And I think a lot of it was like just normal first time, any first time parents, there's going to be there's a lot of unknowns, right? And I was someone who my mom would always say, like, you don't like change. You just can't handle change. And motherhood is, full of change, like daily, hourly, by the minute. And it was a big, big adjustment for me. So I took some months off for maternity leave, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I love this kid with all my heart, but I need to go back to work because at least I know what to expect there. Like nap time's never the same, like, all of these things. And it just was like, very, I didn't know this at the time, but very triggering for me. And so that versus, I guess, today, first of all, like there's just so much learning that comes from each kid. But I think, we actually never knew we were going to have a third kid. And so, knowing that this is our last one, I think is a major part of it. Knowing that I've been through so much before, I know to expect the unexpected. That's not a surprise to me. And I know that, my 2-year-old, for instance, had a meltdown last night, and that's stressful. Like, I'm not going to lie, that can still be stressful, but it's kind of like now witnessing a thunderstorm that sort of just blows in hard and fast. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And like, but it's going to pass. Like, in 5 minutes, things are going to be fine. So like learning how to regulate my emotions has been work I've done over this past 11 years. And so I can ride that storm out now, like so almost effortlessly. And it's just amazing because I'm able to really enjoy all the moments now.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that kind of takes practice. And, initially, like you said, like we're not able to kind of handle that change sometimes, or, we're just like very anxious and overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And I think at least like for first time moms or new mom, like, I think even if I know that something's like new and unique and it's a new stage that I've never been through, being aware of it and really just kind of like knowing that, like, okay, I'm not supposed to be perfect at this, I'm not supposed to be great at it, is so relieving. And I think like once we take that pressure off of ourselves to know that like we can learn, we can, improve, and we can progress with them. Like they're going through all these things for the first time, but so are we. And I think like that has been like the biggest kind of like flip or switch of the light for me, of like, okay, like maybe I don't have to have it all figured out, and it's okay if there's going to be these things changing and occurring and going on. But like that realization, that awareness took so much work to really just like get to that point. Like I just thought, oh, everybody has it all figured out. Like everybody has all these different, ways of doing things, and they're so amazing because like they've been able to get there. And I was kind of like beating myself up of like, why can't I do that?
Yes, yes, all of that, all of the above. I think, one of the biggest things I learned about myself is that I was a perfectionist. And, the way my definition of a perfectionist was someone who was like super organized, and like my house is always messy. Um, and I just, my definition was very external, versus internal. And that's where my perfectionism shows up, is internally. And like you said, Sarah, like this pressure that we put on ourselves, this comparison game that we get into, that, I mean, I think all of us go through this. But it's recognizing, that's why, and I know we're going to talk more about it, but that's why part of my care method is the A, it stands for awareness. Because you got to start to get to know yourself and like what your thoughts are before you can really work through that.
Yeah. So let's go into the care method and kind of like break that down. What do each of the letters stand for? And, why is that something that you feel so, I guess, passionately about? Like that is like your core to what you want to share and bring to moms.
Yeah. So, it really, I'll just share a little backstory of how I came here. It was when my daughter was probably around 2 years old. I just remember like waking up having that moment of, oh my gosh, like I have everything. I had this plan and my life has fallen according to this plan. My life is basically, perfect, quotation marks, because I've got everything I ever wanted. I've got the husband, the two kids, the house, and like I still felt like something was missing. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. Um, and it was sort of like a mixed bag of emotions because then I'm like, well, why am I not fulfilled? Because so then I felt guilty, because this is what you said you wanted, and really, so I had to go on this exploration process of, like I said, rediscovering who I was, because I really was just like following the emotions of this plan, that I set out for, but how much of that was really my plan, or how much it was like what I saw other people doing and what I thought the American dream was and the perfect life and all of that. So for me, that started out with counseling. I had always really been into personal development. So I um, read countless books from all different viewpoints. And so part of my method, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but part of my method that's really, really important fast forward was actually several years later, and this is where we start with the care method, is like what I was still not doing after all this time was slowing down. I could not slow down, and it really kept me sort of like I was learning tools, I was applying tools in my life, and my life was improving, but until I was really able to sit down, and for me what it looked like was meditation. It's not the same for everyone, but the C is, consciously connecting. And really, I worked with clients one on one to come up with a plan that will help, will be tailored to them, which will help them just be able to slow themselves down first. Because until you do that, we're all programmed to be such doers. Do. A lot of our worth is tied up in doing. Like, who are we if we're not changing a diaper, or cleaning the house, or if you're a working mom, like being a rock star in work? um, just don't take time to connect with ourselves. And so that's sort of step one. You got to start there, and it gives you the ability then to like be able to get clarity and focus, and to be able to effectively prioritize. Okay, like now, what do I need to see? Which goes into the awareness piece. And so, step two is the A of the care framework is awareness. So, this is like where we really dig into like realizing we are not our thoughts, we are the thinker of our thoughts. And so many people don't realize that every thought that pops up in our mind, a lot of us accept it as truth. And we don't really take a moment to examine whether or not it, in fact, is true. And the way we talk to ourselves comes out in our actions and our words. It really impacts our entire lives. So until we really start to examine that and have that come up, and we don't know what we're working with, it's like, um, I spent so much time just thinking, I don't know, thinking I was a bad mom, for instance, because of XYZ. And a lot of times, that was just, there were a lot of underlying thoughts that I were not even on the conscious level, because I would never slow down to do things like journaling or meditation or whatever. And so once I started slowing down, all of a sudden I started to hear the voice of the things that I was saying to myself. And it was like, oh, wow, no wonder I feel bad. And half of these things I'm thinking are completely false. Some of them have a grain of truth to them, but they're not fully true. And so really looking at those things. And then the R stands for re-energize. This includes setting boundaries, like really understanding boundaries, because I think for me, I know this is the case, and for so many other moms that I work with, is that we really probably weren't modeled boundaries very well. And this is where our people pleasing comes into play, our inability to say no to things, um, just not using our voice. It showed up everywhere, but it showed up mostly in my relationship with my husband. So there was a lot of built up resentment because I wasn't setting and maintaining my boundaries. So boundaries are huge. Um, and then what's also included in that is habits. So figuring out, after you've gone through this awareness and you've set your priorities, figuring out like what habits are going to support you to best accomplish your goals. And then which ones do I need to let go of? It's huge. It's so huge. And then the E is for empower. And this is also just a huge lesson for so many of us, is that um, I read this book years ago, really before I started slowing down. So I got the message, but I didn't really come to know it until years later. But the book is called, it's got a curse word, but How to Un-F Yourself. I'll just say that. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Sarah.
No.
Um, well, so basically it talked about how, like, look around at your life, everything in your life you are responsible for. And so if you're looking around at your life and there are things there that you really, really don't like, guess what? The only person you can point back to is you. And I was like, what? What? Like, total mic drop. Like, how could this be? But it comes with like just learning how to take 100% responsibility uh, for your life. And you can't control the circumstances, right? But there are choices that you can make in terms of how you respond to circumstances, um, how you choose to react versus respond versus react when you're having a disagreement with your spouse, like, which was the case for me. And it completely changed my life when I started applying that 100% responsibility concept to my life. So that's the care method, and that's what I walk moms through when they work with me. And I typically work with moms like for a 12-week period. Um, these are lifelong tools that are going to be just transformative, and it's a system that took me 6 years to work through. And I took a lot of twists and turns, but um, it, it's like magic, right? You still have to work the process, but working the right process to build better relationships with yourself, your spouse, and your children. It's just, I can't even describe how different your life can look just in a very short amount of time if you're working through this.
Yeah. I definitely think, the ability to slow down has been so useful and something that like I have picked up and really tried to like focus on. um I think sometimes we're always after that, like I want to call it like that chase, like what's the next thing that we have to do, or what's the next thing that we have to learn, or what's going to be the answer to this or that. And I think sometimes when we really just take the time to slow down, we realize that like we do have those answers, or we do have the solution, and we do know what is going to work best for our family. I think a lot of times we hear so many conflicting advice or this or that, and we're kind of like torn between, should we do this or should we do that, or what's the right way, quote unquote, to be like raising our family. Or I catch myself a lot of times like all those things like, oh, don't do this, like do this. And I'm like, well, I've been doing this already. Like, like, am I wrong? Did I like scar my child? Have I been like showing her, all these things that like she shouldn't do? And I think, like once we take the time to just realize, like, when you know more, like you can do more, but don't kind of like beat yourself up for everything that has kind of like occurred in the past. And like you said, like, oh, like we're taking responsibility for everything for ourselves. Like you had gotten that message before, but it like took a while to kind of like set in and like realize that. So like I think sometimes we get exposed to these messages or things that are coming towards us, and it's there and it's showing itself, but it does take some time to really like kick in and want to be something that we implement in our lives. It takes time to really kind of like process it and be like, oh, maybe that is something that I should do more of or develop a habit around or something like that. I think there's so much resistance at first, and that has to do with the, very fast paced kind of like just move on to the next thing. We can't slow down and really register that change is good and change can occur and that we're capable of it. So I think, like tying in all of those aspects is really, you've hit the golden ticket on all of that and really just kind of like packaged it into something that's so, uniquely beneficial for moms. And I think when we're able to learn from each other and really just take time to, implement somebody else's journey and take it as hearing their story and hearing what they've gone through and then tweaking it to, fit our lifestyle. I think that's like what works best and what like I've had so much, I guess, like fun with doing, like getting able to listen to like so many different moms and so many different women and just like all their different backgrounds and really just like, that awareness comes back in and being able to say like, I don't have to do like everything on like this specific checklist, but I can take like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I can be more, aware of like how I'm going to react and what's going to work for me, and learning that and becoming empowered. I think that's what like true empowerment is, like being so, not like so confident, but like being confident in like the decisions that we are making as individuals versus like just trying to mimic somebody that might look like they have the answer, if that
It's
makes
never
sense.
gonna work. It's never gonna work. I mean, I think that's why I love coaching so much. And the reason I decided to become a coach was because of how impacted I was by a coach that I had. And so, um, the thing is that, I like how you compare it. I think there's absolutely a ton of benefit to therapy. So do not get me wrong. It's played a tremendous part in my journey. But what I love about coaching is that, you have the answers. Like you said, Sarah, like we all have our own answers. It's not for me to tell you what you should do or how you should raise your kids. And, I think um, there's a lot of value too. And like, and I've taken them myself in parenting courses. But what I realize is that it always, in any of this work that we do, it always comes back to us. Right. And so, especially when it comes to motherhood, we are modeling for our kids, how to show up in the world. And so, you know, in order for us to model it, we have to really embody what it is we're working on, whether it's boundaries, whether it's good habits, like they're learning that straight from us. And they're taking what they learn from us and they are going to take that into their own adulthood and raising families. And so this is really like, it has an intergenerational impact, right?
Yeah. And I know, you were talking about before with boundaries and how that really kind of, tied into the relationship with your husband. Can you kind of like go into that a little bit more in depth and like what that did for you when you were setting those boundaries and making these differences, and how that kind of shaped your relationship? Because I think a lot of the times, like, you know, we have these babies and we're told like, like the relationship with our babies or what baby needs. And then like now, like, like we're learning about ourselves and things like that. But we kind of not forget, but we don't talk about that relationship with the other person who is in their life as well, and just, those around us.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really, that was one of the first tools that I implemented, was boundaries. Like I said, like I didn't really know what a boundary was. And I remember it was my therapist who introduced me to a book called Boundaries. Um, and for many years, she would pull that book out and reference it. And I would be like, oh gosh, like this again. Oh, please stop. But so, boundaries is it's a process to learn, but, and it gets messy. Oh my goodness, it can be so messy. So, in the beginning of like me understanding that boundaries were actually, I felt like they were maybe an unloving thing in my mind at the time. Um, Realizing that boundaries are like such a loving, it's it's the most loving thing you can do to create just like clarity. If you've ever heard that phrase, clarity is kindness, right? It's like, um, just making it clear, like what are your deal breakers? Like, what are your non-negotiables? And I had a lot of those that I had not made clear to my husband. Um, and it can be things that, um, you may think are like, would anyone think this is important or not? It's what's important to you. Like for me, is I had so much resentment built up around like clutter. He loves to clutter spaces, and like you would think, okay, is this really going to jeopardize your relationship? Well, for us, for me, it was a big problem. And, I would go round and round with him about it, but he wasn't hearing me until I had to say, like, um, and this doesn't have to be a line in the sand. Now, I'll just be honest. For me, in the beginning, I was a while I was learning, I was like a line in the sand. Like you are not going to have clutter in this space. And if you do, I'm going to move it. And, so it was very black and white. It doesn't have to be like that. But, um, like I said, as you go through this process, if you've never implemented boundaries, you just have to start somewhere. And so gradually over time, the important thing is to carry through, like what are the consequences? We're not responsible. And the consequences were like, I'm going to take this stuff and donate it, which I did. And it was a very, oh gosh, it was uncomfortable. It was very, but we teach people how to treat us. And so I taught him that, he could just do whatever he wanted in terms of like cluttering. And I would just, start yelling, and then I would get over it. It would be an outburst. And then like nothing would change. Nothing would change until I started putting that boundary in and then actually following through. Then it was like, oh, okay, this is serious and she means it. And gradually over time, like it's still not perfect, but we came to a middle ground. Okay, here's your space to clutter up. Do whatever you want with it, right? I'm totally fine. Totally. I'm not fine with it. I don't love it, but I can deal with it, and I'm not going to touch this. And so he feels respected. And I feel good because I'm getting what I want to and what's really.
Yeah, I think that's great that you kind of like tied and, it is like working together and explaining like, what you want and laying down that boundary. Because I think if we're not open and we're not communicating our wants and what that boundary might be, it's never going to get across, or it's going to be something that's seen as not a big deal, or it doesn't really matter, or they've never had an issue with it before, so like I'm just going to keep doing this. And I think like it's so, I don't know a word for it, but like it's so beneficial when we finally you know ask for the things that we want and we express those things out loud to others
Yes.
around us.
Yeah, because what was happening was is that uh, I was building up so much resentment, which was turning into anger and bitterness. And then it was not only impacting me and the way I felt, it was impacting my relationship. It was impacting, I was yelling. My kids were seeing that. Like, it was just a bad situation for everyone involved.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can lead to like a lot of miscommunication, or just like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you mad at me? And like, just kind of like all those emotions. And like to top it on, with like all these new things that are going on with a new baby and things like that. I think like sometimes the real question is just like asking yourself, like, what do you want? Because like I think that was an issue that we had early on, and my husband was kind of like, well, how can I help? Like, what do you need me to do? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't even know what I wanted. And I think that was like so hard for me to comprehend, because not that I always knew what I wanted, but like I at least kind of had an idea or a grasp on like, where I saw things going or what was going on. And I just felt so, kind of like lost in my wants. And I had to like just, slow down and take that time for myself to really ask, like, what do I want to be happening? Like, cause I was just like, expecting him to help me, but I didn't even know what he should be helping me with.
That is such a good point, Sarah. Um, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we kind of work through is, I think, a couple of things like understanding what your values are can really help. Like, just so many of us just don't stop and ask ourselves, like, what's really important to us, like, overall in our life, and starting from that place, and then like asking yourself. Sometimes it's easier to start with like what you don't want. Sometimes it's hard for us to know what we want, like you said. So writing out like what we don't want, and then backing into what it is we do.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good point. Because I think it is sometimes easier, like especially in those like initial like few months, years, and everything, to be like, well, that's not working. I don't like that, or I don't want that. Like you might not be able to say like what you want, because like maybe that hasn't like come up or come across or anything. But I think it's a lot easier to say what's not working and what's not making you happy and what's frustrating you. And like things like that. So I think that's a really good you know
Yeah, then you can start there, and you can look at that. You can turn it around. Like, hey, what what needs to be done to make
yeah.
it's all about that reframe.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you have any like final piece of advice or words of wisdom, or something that like you really feel you have learned since entering motherhood that would be beneficial to new moms that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, we talked about it. I think you started. You gave spoiler alert. I think the number one thing, and to be transparent, this is something I still work on, is that not putting so much pressure on yourself. Realizing that you do have all the answers, and to trust yourself. Maybe that's something new. Just trusting yourself, like really knowing that, like, the end of the day, they're going to be fine. The kids are going to be fine. You're going to be fine. They're going to be fine if you're fine.
Do you have any kind of like specific things that you have done to, you know, trust yourself more easily, or just really kind of like get that ball rolling with like learning to trust yourself?
Yeah. Um, I would say that this is not this is not easy. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but just like getting quiet, getting quiet, spending ideally I'd spend like 10 minutes of days in silence. I don't get there most days. I spend a few minutes in silence every day, and I'm just like, just tuning in. I'm tuning into like my heart and like, you know, for me, my faith is huge and where it will guide me. Um, and that coupled with just setting the intention of how I want to be as a mother, and just just going with it, like trusting that I've set that intention. Like I want to see myself as, calm no matter what craziness my husband or my kids or my coworkers, whatever kind of silliness they get into, I'm going to maintain composure and my calm. And I really think just fixing my mind on that. Um, there's a lot of subconscious work that's going on that's pushing me towards that goal. That I only have to think about trusting myself. Sort of like an automatic pilot sort of hack.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, for like sharing everything about your journey and where you've really come from and all the work that you're doing to help moms and your care method and what goes into that and really just kind of like, empowering ourselves and discovering who we are and tapping into all of that. So, I really appreciate like everything that you've shared with us and this whole conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. This is so much fun. I feel like we covered a lot and I enjoyed the conversation so much.
Yeah. Can you let us know how we can reach you, how we can get in contact with you, and if you have, any specific things like going on right now in your life that you want to share?
Yeah, yeah. So, I the best way to really get in touch with me is through my community, which is on a Facebook group, which is called From Overwhelmed to Connected Mom. And I am on Instagram as well. So I'm under Melissa underscore mom coach to make it really easy. And I just launched my group program, which is in progress. So hopefully more to come on that in the near future, the next round. But I do work one-on-one with clients, as I mentioned. I work them. My signature program is a 12 program. And so if anyone who's listening is interested in that, please reach out. I'd love to have a chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, this wraps up yet another episode of Entering Motherhood. I hope that you have found this episode helpful, and if you liked it, please share it with others who might also benefit from this information. If there's anything that you'd like to know more about, or maybe you know someone who'd like to be on the show, please visit my website, enteringmotherhood.com. I'm so thrilled to be going on this journey with you and getting the amazing opportunity to help moms during this postpartum experience. You can also now find us on Instagram and Facebook at Entering Motherhood.